Well, good morning, everybody. Go ahead and turn in your Bibles to Ecclesiastes chapter 11. Lord willing, we will finish off the book of Ecclesiastes today. Next week, the class will be, Lord willing, led by our brother Keith Sharp. And then William has plans to start a new series after that on 1 Timothy, I believe it is. Yes, 1 Timothy we'll be looking at after that. So, let's just jump right into the text. As I mentioned at the end of last week, we are coming up to the conclusion. And it really, I believe, starts here in verse 9 and 10 of chapter 11. Solomon writes, "Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and in the sight of your eyes. But know, for all these, God will bring you into judgment. Therefore, remove sorrow from your heart and put away evil from your flesh, for childhood and youth are vanity." Youth is one of those exciting times of life. For one, there is a life full of opportunity that is ahead of a person. There is a lot of things that a person could become. And the advantage of youth is that typically we have not tied ourselves down with commitments. But as we get older, due to family and work obligations, oftentimes the scope of what we can do in life, the freedom we have narrows. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Some people view that as a bad thing. I think every stage of life has its own rewards and blessings. The thing with youth, though, is that it is a somewhat of a blank slate with lots of potential and with the energy to accompany doing things. And Solomon encourages young people to take full advantage of that. Now, what is he encouraging and was he not encouraging? Well, first of all, he is encouraging that exploration that comes with youth. If we want to go, hear people say, "Oh, well, I'm gonna take a year off and travel around Europe or something." Well, that's a great time to do it when we're young, to see the world, to actually experience life. But he puts a qualifier on it, doesn't he? He says, go ahead and do the things that you want. You want to go to university to study this, go to university to study this. You want to go to Europe to do that, go to Europe to do that, whatever. But know, for all these things, God will bring you into judgment. At the beginning of the book, Solomon did not mention judgment. In fact, God is largely absent, and we'll get into the reasons why later on. From the beginning portion of the book, he's not mentioned. But as the book goes on, God is increasingly mentioned more and more. And now we see the terms and references to judgment coming up in the conclusion. So yes, do what you want to do. Take advantage of what life has to offer. But know that God will bring you into judgment for that. So make sure that what you're doing is not evil. Put away evil from your flesh. So Solomon, contrary to the world's adage, is not saying what some say is, "Oh, youth is the time to sow your wild oats. Youth is the time to experiment with drugs and casual sex and stuff like that and get it out of your system," as they say. That is not what Solomon is saying or advocating for here. And remove sorrow from your heart. And we'll see one of the reasons why. Sometimes youth can also be a time of a bit of petulance or depression. And I think part of that comes from the expectations of adulthood and not necessarily being well prepared for it, and it seeming to be a bit more of a burden and too much of a shift than was expected. But Solomon is saying, remove sorrow from your heart. Go ahead and enjoy your life at that stage in your life. And one of the reasons why we'll see is coming up right away. So starting in chapter 12, we'll read verses 1 through 8, and then zoom on things. Solomon starts with youth again, and he quickly switches gears. He says, remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult times come, the difficult days come, and the years draw near when you say, I have no pleasure in them. While the sun and the light, the moon and the stars are not darkened, and the clouds do not return after the rain. In the day when the keepers of the house tremble and the strong men bow down, when the grinders cease because they are few, and those that look through the windows grow dim, when the doors are shut in the streets and the sound of grinding is low, when one rises up at the sound of a bird and all the daughters of music are brought low. Also they are afraid of height and of terrors in the way. When the almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper is a burden and desire fails. For man goes to his eternal home, and the mourners go about the streets. Remember your Creator before the silver cord is loosed, or the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher shattered at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the well. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, all is vanity. So, that was a lengthy text. 2 times Solomon uses a phrase here. And I want us to really pay attention to that. Remember your Creator is the phrase that he uses in verse 1, that he introduces this section of text with, and verse 6, remember your Creator before the silver cord is loosed, right before death. At your youth, right before death. And everything else is in between. There are difficult days coming, and that is one of the reasons why the young man, apply to a young woman as well, are encouraged to enjoy their youth. There are going to be difficult days ahead, Solomon says. Now, he focuses largely on health concerns here, which we will analyze, but it doesn't have to be necessarily restricted to health concerns. Before the difficult days and the years draw by when people say, I have no pleasure in them. It could be that a person's life has become monotonous and repetitive, that they are bowed down with monetary concerns or obligations, and every day seems to just string out as the day before it, and there's a never-ending procession of days, seemingly never-ending procession of days, where that's going to be the same day in and day out, and a person is just going through life and they don't have a particular pleasure in them. Solomon is saying, remember God before that happens. We'll get to why. Then he gets into the health concerns. Now one could ask, what is Solomon talking about here? The sound of grinding, the keepers of the house trembled, the grasshopper being a burden. All of these are pictures of what happens to the body as we age. So in the day when the keepers of the house tremble and the strong men bow down, that is the bones and muscles and joints starting to fail. And I mean, I'm only 38 and my knee is already starting to go, so I'm only lightly familiar with this, and it's already a nuisance. But we've seen people, they're bowed down, or they have trouble walking, or they have to walk with the assistance of a walker or a cane. Our body starts to fail us. The windows grow dim, eyesight. We'll need glasses, or we'll develop cataracts, and we'll need cataract surgery. The daughters of music are brought low. Our senses begin to dull. We don't hear as well as we used to. Now, fortunately, we live in an age where through various forms of technology, generally better diet than they did in Solomon's day, we can delay a lot of these longer than I think people in Solomon's day could. But we do get to this point as well if we end up living a longer life and dying of natural causes. And we have a certain amount of technology that can help overcome those deficiencies. But we don't hear as well as we used to. Even the grasshopper, even something light, our strength starts to fail. Even something light seems heavy. We can't go around and move furniture like we did necessarily in our teens and 20s and younger ages. I mean, the thought of lifting something that heavy would not be possible for something that's very advanced in age. And there is a certain extent where there is some psychological things as well, where a person might start to become afraid of things that rationally don't need to seem to be, or waking up in the middle of the night for no apparent reason, not being able to go back to sleep, dementia is a possibility, and then desire failing. And I do believe that Solomon is talking possibly about sexual desire here as well, even within the context of the marital relationship at an advanced age, just not that hormonal drive that there was in younger years. Solomon, as we know from Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon, is not shy about talking about such things in an appropriate manner, of course. And ultimately, we see man going to his eternal home. That's interesting. Not too often that we see the word, a reference to eternity in the Old Testament. This is one of those exceptions. But he doesn't necessarily go so far as the concept that we have in the New Testament, simply that there is no returning from that. There is no knowledge in the grave, as he said in last week's that we looked at, that a dead, or sorry, let me just quote that. Where was it? I seem to have misplaced. Oh, I just went right by it. Yes. For him who is joined to all the living, there is hope. For a living dog is better than a dead lying. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing, and they have no more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. There's no coming back from that. Whether he means the spirit surviving, but we know from this verse 7, that the spirit returns to God who gave it, and he talks about that in chapter 3 as well, an acknowledgement of the spirit going. That is death, of course, that he is talking about. Remember your Creator before the silver cord is loosed. This is an image that was common in the ancient world about us being connected to God by a silver cord. It's simply a poetic or literary mechanism, not meant to be taken literally. It's just poetic and symbology that Solomon is using here. Same with the golden bowl, etc., etc. Well, why? The world often goes ahead and says, well, religion is something that you get into when you're older. You don't have to take it seriously while you're younger. That'll just actually, you're encouraged to not get too involved with religion when you're younger, because that will deprive you of the full range of experience and enjoyment of life and hold you back. No, religion's for older people, and as they start to go, well, then they turn to their Creator. I'm going to tell you that the reason why Solomon says this, if we're too busy when we're young to have any time for God, there is only a momentary time in which people may turn to God when they're older, and generally it doesn't stick and it doesn't work. If we don't have the foundation of wisdom and experience in trusting God through the difficult times in our life when we are young and in our middle age, those that turn to God in their older age might believe that there's some comfort, or might even believe that, if I turn to God now and find religion, I'll be spared from all of these things. I'll be spared from all of the pain. I'll be spared from the pain of cancer or the limitations of heart disease. We're never promised that at all. We're promised of a God who gives us strength to see us through things, and a God who promises us that there is a better home, not a follow me and you'll get out of all the difficulties of life card. Solomon didn't promise that. Jesus didn't promise that. And all of a sudden, the person is bitter. They've gone through their life without God, and now they turn away, that now they're bitter and disappointed as life goes on and they're near the end of it. Now, this isn't true of everyone, of course, but if we've ignored God for the most of our life, a genuine faith is rare at the very end. And difficult times might draw us closer to God initially, but they will not have staying power. And they will not have the power that's backed up with a lifetime of experience and wisdom in putting our trust in God. It's important for us to remember God while we have time, while we are young. Solomon encourages us to do that in the beginning and the end of this section of the text. Why didn't Solomon, actually we'll save that part for afterwards, about why he waited so long to say this. We'll save that for verse 13 and 14. Now we get to the conclusion, the very end conclusion of this book, and it is one of the most powerful conclusions that you will find in a Bible book, or even any books in secular literature as well. Verse 9 through to 14. And moreover, because the preacher was wise, he still taught the people knowledge. Yes, he pondered and sought out and set in order many proverbs. The preacher sought to find acceptable words, and what was written was upright, words of truth. The words of the wise are like goads, and the words of the scholars are like well-driven nails, given by one shepherd. And further, my son, be admonished by these. Of making many books there is no end, and much study is wearisome to the flesh. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. According to rabbinic tradition, Solomon was said to write Ecclesiastes and Proverbs in the latter part of his life. And it's viewed that he came to his senses. I would like to think that's true, but we cannot conclude that conclusively from this text. There is encouraging things, though, that while he was, because he was wise, he still taught the people knowledge. That is a continuous process that's going on. And he sought to find and arrange acceptable words. I think that is, though, our hoping that that is true and that he repented near the end of his life. Solomon is saying here that this is not the totality. There's many observations in here from which we can draw, and we have drawn application to ourselves, and the people at the time could have drawn application to themselves. But there is more. It is a process, and it continues. And he could be pointing towards Proverbs, or if he wrote Proverbs first, vice versa. He still taught the people knowledge. Yes, he pondered and sought out and set in order many proverbs. We don't have them all. The number of proverbs in Proverbs is depending on how you count what is a proverb, because there's some things that are a little bit iffy in the first 10 chapters, whether to count them or not, or where you divide them up. You'll get about 800 in total in the book of Proverbs. 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 32 said that Solomon wrote 1,005 songs and 3,000 proverbs. So we are missing approximately 2,200 of the proverbs that he wrote. Now, it could be that some of what's here in Ecclesiastes could count, and that would bring the number up probably to about another 200 in total. But still, we're missing the vast majority of what he said. What is recorded for us, we know, is what the Spirit wanted us to retain. So it's not as if we are missing out on something. If we really needed to know it, the Spirit would have revealed it to us. But Solomon was dedicated to teaching, and he continued to teach. And he encouraged people to seek out and find acceptable words, or the riddles of the wise, the enigma, as he says in the introduction of Proverbs, and what was upright, words of truth, which is what he has recorded throughout this book. Truth is not always easy to hear. Truth is always preferable, no matter how difficult, to a lie. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free, Jesus said. But the path to that freedom is not without pain. Ask the people on the day of Pentecost, when Peter preached that sermon, how they felt about the truth that was being spoken to them when they realized we just crucified our Messiah. They've accepted that as truth. Tone and inflection is not conveyed to us in the scriptures. But when they ask the apostles, when they ask Peter, what shall we do? I've always imagined it in my head as this almost terrified, is there even anything we can do? We've jailed the Messiah. I mean, we may as well just throw up our hands and give up. Is God going to forgive something like that? Something that heinous, something that evil, something that wicked? And Peter says, yes. That truth was very difficult for them to hear. There are words of the Savior. There are some commandments that our Lord gives that I read and I think, that one's pretty easy to obey. That one's relatively easy to obey. I can do that one. And there's others. And what it is for me might be different than what it is for you. But there's others that I'm looking at going, oh, that's going to be a little bit difficult to follow. Or, he said, don't do that. But I already went ahead and did that before. Or that's something I like to do, and now you're saying I can't do that, etc., etc. They can be goads to push us forward and admonish us, but ultimately, the truth is always preferable to a comfortable lie. The truth is always preferable to, and we'll counter this in Timothy, to having our ears tickled, giving heed to fables. And that is true in the Old Testament as well as in the New Testament. And the Old Testament is full of those that listened to fables. Have you ever gone through the Bible, read a verse that you've read probably dozens of times, and it refreshes your memory, and then all of a sudden something that you hadn't considered jumps right out to you? I had that happen when I was preparing this lesson for the next verse, verse 12. I've read this verse multiple times, and that's the beauty of reading the Bible over and over again. You can oftentimes come back to something even familiar and get more and more out of it. In fact, I think that is one of the proofs of its inspiration, is its inspiration that we can get from it. It's not one of the major ones. I don't think that would convince skeptics, but for those of us that have already accepted the Bible, we see that, and it helps reinforce our faith. It says, further, my son, be admonished by these, of making many books there is no end, and much study is wearisome to the flesh. Of the making of many books there is no end. All you have to do is walk through chapters, and you'll see that. There are always books being published, and you will never be able to read every book that comes out. In fact, some books are just a plain waste of time because they're so poorly written or contain subject matter that is so not good. We've looked at an angle before. We introduced it actually at the very beginning of the book, I think in the second lesson. He says, I set my heart, in chapter 1 and verse 17 and 18, I set my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this also is grasping for the wind. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. And now Solomon is saying, study is wearisome to the flesh. And we've taken the position that Solomon has been saying that wisdom has great advantage. But wisdom requires hard work. If you want to be rich, you've got to work hard. Sometimes you might inherit funds and you don't have to work hard, but that does not happen with wisdom. No one inherits wisdom. And I said, okay, that's what I'll say about this verse. That's what I'll say about this verse Sunday morning. And then it occurred to me, and I kind of hinted at it before, what Solomon is saying, and it fits in the context of the words of truth and seeking out the words of the scholars and seeking out the Proverbs. There is no way that you will ever study everything that there is to study and know everything that there is to know. It is impossible. And you are going to wear yourself out even trying. Study, true, deep study of a subject, is mentally exhausting. So make sure you're studying the right things. We don't have an infinite amount of time. Just like in the shows we watch and in the books we read, we have to be careful in the studies we pursue and the wisdom we pursue to make sure we are redeeming the time. Make sure we are studying and reading the right things. Not all knowledge is of equal value. Some things are frivolous and interesting. Some things will lead us astray from the truth and are deceptive. Those can be profitable to study if we know the truth and are interested in proving what is true by looking at the error and comparing the two of them side by side. But we recently have a sister, and William's bulletin article is dealing with this, of a sister who has spent time studying something that is written by an opponent to the church. What that person is saying is not true, but that studying of that error has led this person astray. We need to be careful with what we study, and I'm thankful that William is addressing in the bulletin articles the error that is there. There's a second point that I think, additional point that I think Solomon is making. You cannot completely study yourself into wisdom. You cannot completely study yourself into, yes, I actually did mean exactly what I said. There's a certain amount in which we have to experience. I could read books about carpentry all day long, and that would not make me a carpenter. I will confess, William knows it, John knows it, my grandfather knows it. I barely know which end of the hammer hammers in the nail. Okay, I've got skills in other direction, and that is not one of my skills. I know that, and with some painful to watch hammering techniques, I can get a nail driven in. Reading 25 volumes on carpentry would not make me a carpenter. At one point in time, you actually have to do something. The scriptures are the same. Life and wisdom go hand in hand. And that's what Solomon has been saying throughout this. If we pay attention to what the Lord has said, we'll learn from other people's mistakes. When Paul says that these were written for our admonition upon whom the ends of the age have come, referring to the people of Israel, what he is saying is these people messed up bad, and God was incredibly angry with them. Learn what they did. Don't make the same mistake. We are benefiting from the mistakes of others. That's when we learn and study that when we come up to a similar situation in our life, we'll hopefully be able to make the application and say, oh, here's a scenario. Oh, right, the scriptures say I should do this. And so we do that. But at some point in time, we need to learn from experience and then come back and study, and they help reinforce each other. At some point in time, we need to just go out, and I don't want to say much more than that because I think that's the theme of William's lesson, a sermon this morning. At some point, we just have to do what God has told us to do. And sometimes the way that we do it might not be the most effective at first. When we're sharing the gospel, we might stumble over our words. But as time goes on, we will learn more. When Paul says a preacher of the gospel, a teacher of the gospel, must needs be patient, I think you understand what that means when you've sat down with somebody and studied the gospel who is very hostile, who's very mocking of what the gospel says, who mocks our faith, and tries to goad a person into an angry response. We're all going to encounter a person like that at some point in time. And hopefully we remember Paul's statement at that point in time and said, oh no, we got to be patient with this person that we're teaching the gospel to. But maybe it is that we do snap back and we get in this argument and we go, oh, that wasn't effective. I'm not very good at this. And then read their Bibles later on and come across that verse and go, oh, all right, yes, that's the attitude I should have had. We have to experience life and we have to study to show ourselves approved and to learn, but the two reinforce each other as they go along. I believe that is another point that Solomon is making in verse 12. Then he comes across to the whole conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. Well now, Solomon, thank you for that. Why didn't you just say that from the very beginning? Why take 12 chapters to say that? Why not just at the very, here he says, all right, all is vanity at the beginning, and there's a cycle, and people aren't remembered, they go into the grave, and then he says he tested all these different things. We looked at all the different things he tested in the first few verses. Why not just at the very end of that, in verse 2, or in chapter 2, at the end of chapter 2, say, fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all, end of book. There you go. Much, much shorter, gets to the point, right? The beauty of the book of Ecclesiastes, I think, is that it is written so that it can be understood by people at all points in their life and at all points of spiritual maturity. I believe there is a reason why God is largely absent and the mention of God largely absent from the beginning of the book. Any adult, whether Jew or Gentile, and there was a lot of Israelites at his time that were not faithful in their study to the Lord and should have known more about the Lord but didn't. So in their level of knowledge, they may as well have been Gentiles, sadly. Everybody understands that cycle. Everybody understands the grave. Everybody understands there's no remembrance where we're going. Some people might understand riches, or they might fantasize about riches. Some people might look at life and say, this is what it's about. This is what it's about. Solomon had the advantage of being able to check off every one of those boxes that people say, this is what life is about. He who has the most toys wins. That's what life is about, right? Nope. Solomon, we read it, had a lot of toys. And he says you can't take them with you, and it's vanity. Solomon, people might say, well, it's the importance of a good name, and I'll be remembered by those that come after me. Heard that expression. We don't ever truly die. We're remembered by those that come after us. I think that's true of one generation, maybe up to a couple, and then a person is forgotten. Nor will there be any remembrance of things that are to come. Oh, sorry, I meant to quote the preceding part. There's no remembrance of former things. These are concepts that people can understand that are broken down successively until Solomon is able to say, none of these things are sufficient, even from an entirely physical perspective, to say this is what life is all about. There's only one thing that Solomon is left standing on, and he breaks it down in these 12 chapters, and that is, fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. It doesn't matter what profession we have, unless, of course, that profession is antithetical to the gospel. It doesn't matter whether we are a humble clerk. It doesn't matter if we're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. It doesn't matter whether we're an accountant. It doesn't matter whether we are a farmer. It doesn't matter whether we're a truck driver. It doesn't matter whether we're an actuary. Those professions ultimately don't matter. They're a means to an end to provide for physical things. It doesn't matter if we're rich. It doesn't matter if we're poor. It doesn't matter if we have 1,000 friends or we have 2 close friends. None of those things matter. It doesn't matter if our name is splashed on every Facebook page in the world, or the only people that know us are our friends and relatives. It doesn't matter if we built the tallest skyscraper in the world, or if we enter this world with barely anything more on our back than what we we didn't come with anything into it. The first set of clothes we had. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. This is the purpose. It is the spiritual dimension that Solomon finishes with, that was absent but is absolutely necessary to understanding life. And if we go through life like that, I think actually we achieve a greater degree of happiness and fulfillment than a lot pursue those other things even successfully, because we know what their true value is. Even if we do end up attaining and being blessed by wealth, and are very thankful to the Lord for it, we know it's a means by which we are just to help other people, and we know we can't take it with us. We still need our focus to be on fearing God and keeping his commandments. God will bring into every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. A few things to say about this. This in no way, shape, or form. It is completely in line with other things in the Old Testament, who will render to each according to his deeds, which Paul quotes in Romans. There is a day of judgment that is coming, Acts chapter 17, verse 31. We see that picture of the judgment scene at the end of Revelation, and our Lord talks about judgment and hell more times than he talks about heaven, but he paints a picture of the judgment, and we know that by his words, John chapter 5, we will be judged in the last day. And we know God shows no partiality. Peter discovered that in Acts chapter 12. He says that. Paul repeats that statement as well. God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. I found that interesting at the end of verse 14. Every secret thing, whether good or evil. We should be rightly terrified of not having repented of something that is evil, or something that we think, oh, maybe we've kept it hidden from everybody else, but God knows about it. We should take comfort, though, that we are being judged for every secret thing, including the good. People may forget the good that we do. As I got a quote here, actually. Some of you might remember it, might recognize it. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones. That is from Mark Antony speaking, Julius Caesar, Act 3, Scene 2. It's in the same context as the famous speech we often hear quoted, "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears." The good that men do is oft interned with their bones and forgotten. That is regrettably too true in the world. It is not true with God. God remembers the good that we've done, even if no one else has seen it. That, I think, is one of the motivators of the faith that we have when Jesus talks about doing the good deeds that we do and doing it in secret. God does remember and God does reward us for it. One of the motivators from a lack of faith on the Pharisees' part of ringing the bell whenever they did a good deed is, I think there was a part of them that said, well, what good is it if my good isn't doing me any good? Right? Who sees it then? There's no point in doing good if I'm not rewarded, if I'm not recognized for it. If I just I help somebody out in secret, well, then it's forgotten about. It's not good anymore. Solomon is saying, no, God sees it. And you are rewarded for it. We've built up our treasures in heaven, and we have that assurance that God will bring every work into judgment, whether good or evil. I emphasize that point because sometimes I think we're too quick to immediately head towards the evil and go right over the good. There is two things that are being judged by God here, and it's not just the things that we did wrong. It is the things that we did right that are being judged and recognized and praised as well. Ultimately, of course, we are saved by his grace. The good that we do is still recognized. That is the conclusion to Ecclesiastes. I hope the study of the book of Ecclesiastes has been profitable to you. It is a book that I think bears looking at multiple times, especially as we go on in life. Like King Lear, the Shakespeare play, it's more appreciated. It can be understood even by someone who's, I think, 15, 16 years old, but I think it's more and more appreciated as we do advance in age, because we've gotten that experience behind us that now says, oh yeah, no, I know what a hard day's work is about, or I know what difficult times are like, and I know what in my heart I've said, oh, this is what life is about. And when Solomon is talking to us, we can it's echoed in our heart. But the practical application for us, the greatest practical application, is for us to ask ourselves, are we living a purpose-filled life that puts God at the center and is involved with fearing God and keeping his commandments? Only you can answer that question for yourself. I joked with William when we were having dinner at his place, Thanksgiving dinner at his place last Sunday, because I was looking around the kitchen and there was one of the quotes that was above the stove, and I said, oh, are you aware that you basically got the entire point of the book of Ecclesiastes hanging right above your stove? And the quote is, the purpose of life is a purpose-driven life. Can we say that about ourselves? Is it a purpose-driven life? And that purpose, is it to serve God and to keep his commandments? Is that our all? Or are we unsatisfied with what God offers and has, and are continually seeking to fill it with the things that Solomon talks about in chapter 2? If we are, I think we need to go back and study, well, on your own time, the book again, and get the point of what Solomon is saying.